Hello, everybody. It's Stephen and Walter here for another episode of So Chatty, and it is episode number 108 for July the 28th, 2023. And today we're going to talk about some more things about machine embroidery because a few topics came up during the week from some of the other people that I was meeting with for, well, Stephen and or Stephanie and Stephen Sews and things like that. But before we get into that, let's talk about works in progress. So I will show you what I've been up to. You've already seen this. If you saw the Idiot Quilter this week, I believe I showed the finished product of that. Let me get the right button. There it is, the Tom T. I am really happy with the way this turned out because this turned out perfect, if I do say so myself. Walter's busy studying it. He's looking for a mistake, but he's not going to find any. So he'll find something else to criticize here in a minute. But I mean, that's a lot of squares. There's about 680 2.5-inch squares to make this. Not a difficult thing to do, but thank God I have an AccuQuilt because it cut all that. Now the pattern itself did not have borders, but I decided to add borders because I want to make it a little bit bigger. And I added the little freestanding lace detail, the snowflake up in his little hat on the ball on his hat. And we're going to talk about some of that kind of stuff as well in today's episode a little later on. But I'm happy with the way it turned out. I used a snowflake and swirl kind of quilt pattern, edge-to-edge design.
Did you have a thread laying on it when you took a picture?
Yes, that's a thread. I didn't realize that was there. Okay, see, he just can't resist. But the thread, yeah, there it is right there up at the top of his nose. That was a loose thread. Okay, just it fell on there. Didn't notice when I took the picture of it. Easily fixed.
So he blew his nose.
Yeah, right. It's a snot ball. What more do you want? And this is the back of the quilt. It's a fairly busy quilt back. So it's hard to see especially in this picture, it's very hard to see the quilting on that. But I thought it turned out pretty good. I'm really happy about it. I am not giving this one away. Not that I give it
looks nice.
Oh, high praise. Walter says it looks nice. That's one step above his usual phrase. It's fine. Nice. He says something's fine.
And the quilting looks wonderful. It's not so dense.
Kind of like your brain, dense. Whatever. So, that's what I've been working on. Oh, I've been working on the cat scratch quilt as well. You can see pieces of there on my design board. If I move the computer, I haven't done any more with it. I got one more cat done. It's in the picture here. So yeah, it's okay to put together, but I'm finding it a little tedious. There's a lot of little pieces, and it's really easy to get your pieces turned backwards or upside down or on the wrong angle. Ask me how I know. Yeah. And you all know if you saw the Idiot Quilter this week that there was that one little problem with the kitty's face. Both kitties' faces, but I fixed that. It's fixed. Walter never noticed it though. It was Dana. Dana noticed it. One of regular subscribers here. So, oh no, it wasn't Dana. It was Jan. It was Jan. Jan actually sent me pictures.
I was gonna say I didn't think it was
Jan. It wasn't Dan, it was Jan. And who's also a regular. Everybody knows Jan. If you've been here for a while, everybody knows Jan. Okay, so what's Walter been working on?
Well, I'm still working on your cat's shirt, but I haven't got it too far along because I've been busy with other things. So.
And I got some more fabric this week that has a really cool cat pattern in it too, which I bought 3 meters of that. So Walter can make me another shirt from that as well. Yeah, I have lots of shirts. But
I'll make that one, but I don't like colors in it.
Well, you're not wearing it.
That's fine.
It's mine. I like the colors in it.
Okay.
Why don't you like the colors in it?
It's a little bit too pale for me. Too blue.
It's got purple in it.
Okay, fine. I'll make it. It'll look fine.
Yes, you will make it. You will make it, and I will enjoy it. And I will like it. And the hell with you. I don't know. What would you like? How about a black on black t-shirt like style?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I knew you would. Anyways, that's what he's been. Well, he's been busy with other things. Like now he's making his car theft proof. What you get today? You got
I got something. Well, it's only available in Ontario and Quebec right now. It's a tag system. It's called tag tracking.
Yeah, and the insurance companies was on the news today are pushing for this
Yeah,
on
yeah,
all cars, like majorly, because they're threatening to raise people's insurance rates if they don't get it done on the cars that are marked as high probability of theft,
yeah. It's
like ours.
a tracking system. They put they don't tell you where they put them because that you'd be able to,
Well, yeah,
right?
the
So
thieves will be, oh yeah,
they
okay.
put RFID. It's a type of technology for tracking items. Um, Sensors all over your car. And then if it gets stolen, you call the cops and you call this number, and then they can track your car. So far, they've had 100%. They claim they have 100%.
Well, on the news today, they said with those tracking devices, there have been 15 cars stolen in the last 24 hours or 48 hours that have those systems on it. They fully recovered 12 of them, and they know where the other three are located
Yeah,
with it. So apparently, it's working out really well in Quebec. Their car thefts have gone way down.
yeah. Well, what's happened in Quebec is they brought out this tag tracking out in Quebec, and because of that, all the thieves have gone to Ontario.
Yeah,
So now Ontario's getting it, so that and the reason it was being bad in Quebec and Montreal specifically is that Montreal is a big shipping port. And what they've been basically doing is taking all these thieved cars and shoving them into shipping containers and shipping them directly to foreign
Africa.
countries. And I guess they only randomly check the containers because they get so many of them in, whether the cars are in there or not. And I think there's a big push to make sure that they start checking more containers
Yeah.
for cars type of thing. So
Well, apparently, though in Alberta, they're having a theft problem too, but it's with trucks. Yeah,
yeah.
that would figure.
And in Alberta, yeah, it's mostly trucks are stealing, and in Ontario, it seems to be varying. They do steal trucks, but they've also been stealing small SUVs like the one I drive
And catalytic converters.
and catalytic converters. But that's a big problem in the U.S. too, the
Yeah.
catalytic converters. And but they've been depends on they target different vehicles depending on like, I mean, you get target one segment, and that one segment starts getting anti-theft devices put into their cars. So then they become less interested in those cars, and they start stealing other cars.
They just steal everything. Just it's just thieves everywhere and scammers.
And
It's
now we've
sad.
heard that some of the drugstores and some of the stores that sell cosmetics and stuff like that, because cosmetics are expensive, are beginning to lock up all their cosmetics because people are thieving them.
Oh no, there'll be a shortage of cosmetics. There's going to be a lot of ugly people out in the streets. Oh no,
Oh, more than the usual.
I don't recognize you. What's different? No makeup. Ah, 2 words: plastic surgery. Anyways, moving right along now that you've had the news on car thefts and things like that. So, announcements. Sewing with Stephanie and Steven on Wednesdays, 9 a.m. Be there, be square. Link in the show notes. Pop-up sew day. Maybe. I'm about 80% sure it's going to happen. I guess I'll have to make up my mind next week, won't I? Yes, because I'm planning it for August the 5th, Saturday, August the 5th, if I'm going to have it. I have not put that in stone yet, but I will put it in stone sometime next week, one way or the other. But advance warning, August the 5th. It's a long weekend here in our province. It's called the Civic Holiday Weekend. And a lot of the provinces have something similar. Not all of them, but
I think Quebec doesn't.
Quebec doesn't, in the Northwest Territories
Yeah,
and Yukon.
yeah.
So I guess all the provinces, we don't count Quebec. Uh, they don't count. With that. So yeah, and I don't think you have one in the States, though. This is Canada centric for it. Nobody knows why we have it. We just take it. Yeah. And it's called something different in every province as well. We call it actually here the Civic Holiday Weekend. That's the old term. The new term is Lord Simcoe Day.
Yeah, and I think in Manitoba they called it Manitoba. They called it something else. I don't know, like a civic holiday at one point. Now they call it Terry Fox Day or something.
And I know in Nova Scotia, I think one of my subscribers said they call it National Day or something like that. So different name for it. Any excuse for drinking beer on a long weekend, right? Okay, so that brings us to the main thing we're going to talk about today. And this has been generated because I've been getting a fair number of questions about different things about embroidery, machine embroidery. People are getting a new machine and they're absolutely petrified of it, what to do with it. Or some people really are sitting on the fence whether they want to buy one or not. They like them, they think it's cool, but they're pretty much limited in their thinking in terms of, well, yeah, I can put nice monograms on towels and maybe do a cute Winnie the Pooh thing over a onesie. They're missing out on the whole thing. Expensive machines, there is a lot you can do with them. Now, we have talked about this before some time ago, but we thought we would talk about it again and add to it some tips and tricks we've learned along the way, because each different type of project, there are some things you need to know. And, sometimes these can be off-putting for people who are just getting started in this. Bottom line is just be patient, start small, move your way up to grandiose with it.
Yeah,
So,
it's best to start with small embroidery items first and then move your way up to more advanced things.
yeah. So we're just going to talk about a variety of things that we have created on our machines. And then we're going to talk about some tips and tricks that you might want to keep in mind for these kind of projects. So we're just going to showcase right now what we have done. So first of all, patches. There are various ways to make patches. This is the way I do them. These are my Idiot Quilter. The top two are Idiot Quilter. The other two are just ones that I made. Actually, the ones below could be patches, or they could actually be coasters as well. Thing about these is there's two different styles here, which you probably can't see that clearly in the pictures I've taken, but the ones that say Idiot Quilter on them, the background of these are completely embroidered. There isn't any fabric involved in these. This is all thread. And you're going to say, well, how does the thread all hold together? Well, use a stabilizer. We'll talk a little bit more about stabilizers. We've done a whole video on the different types of stabilizers and when to use them. So we're not going to go extensively into stabilizers, but basically that's the base you're sewing in. And the two on the bottom are on fabric. So the background in this is actually fabric. It is not just thread, but you can do either type. And there are some specialty stabilizers you can buy that are meant completely for doing nothing but patches. So, if you want to make patches to hand out at something, or for, kids like patches or like stickers, sew on their clothes or something like that, you can do that. But that's really still what I would consider basic embroidery kind of project. You find a pattern, it's stitched out. Then you can get into something that's called freestanding lace and freestanding applique. And these two right here, this one is a freestanding lace, but it is not very open weave. Some can be a very open weave, like that star or snowflake that I put on the Tom tee. That's a very open weave, and it is strictly all thread. There is no fabric. And that's what they call freestanding lace, because it looks like lace. They're really quite pretty. They're really nice at Christmas time. You can make Christmas tree ornaments, things to put on people's gifts. You can do angels. Some can be done, and we'll show you some of these, done as a three-dimensional type of project. But these two are very basic ones, the butterfly. And you can see here I use Christmas fabric in the background. This is freestanding applique. And then the rest of this is all embroidery, including this bottom part here. It's not on fabric. That is all a very close weaved stitching.
However, the part where the Christmas tree is and the this part, that's not embroidery.
Well, they can't really see you pushing the finger.
No, I know, but
what you mean here?
No. I meant where the leaves are.
Yeah, I said that's fabric.
Okay,
that's called freestanding applique.
All right.
I had just said that.
Okay, I wasn't listening.
No, apparently not. What planet are you on? Uranus?
Yeah.
Because you get your head up it. Now, of course, this is a familiar piece here. Like this is just strictly embroidery, but this is a mug rug. And if you notice in the background, there's something that looks like this was a bit of a reject. This one, I didn't get things centered right. But you see in the background, you've got what looks like quilting. And yes, you can do quilting on small pieces in your embroidery machine. Um, some companies, Janome is one of them, especially when they're toting their big, huge M17 machine, that you can quilt a quilt on it. And I will tell you this, no, you can't. Not if you want it to look like it's decent and you don't want to have a headache, because it does not take the place of a long arm. You have to match up the patterns to get a continuous design in it. And it's great if you're doing something like a table runner or placemats or a mug rug, okay? But anything much bigger than that, you might get away with a baby quilt, okay? If it's small enough. Anything beyond that, no, you're asking for trouble. Now, I know someone out there has probably seen somebody like, what's her name, on Power Tools with Thread, or Thread with Power Tools, or whatever it's called. She's got very elaborate embroidery machines, like multiple needle ones, and she claims you can do a whole quilt on it. But you want to know something? I haven't seen her do one yet. I've seen her do small pieces. I haven't seen her do a queen size. Plus, she has long arm anyway, so why would she want to? But there'll be somebody out there say they can do it. It can be done. Yes, it can, but you're asking for a lot of trouble. So if you go back to some of my very early Idiot Quilter episodes, you will see a series.
Yeah, because you attempted to do it.
I did. I gave it and I did. I did do a whole quilt. It took me days and days and a whole lot of swearing and cursing and everything else involved with it. But like I said, it's really not worth it, in my opinion. Okay, so then you can do, speaking of quilts, this is a quilt. It's a wall size. It's more of a wall hanging, but this is a combination of in the hoop applique and actual quilting. You make each of those blocks individually. The machine sews the blocks, not just the embroidery, but it stitches the border pieces or the sashing around them as well.
And it does the embroidery in the background too.
Yes, right? And does the embroidery in the background, does the quilting part of it. Now, this is a method of where you actually create a sort of a quilt sandwich. You have stabilizer, but you have your batting, and then you have your top fabric, and then you put it all together. Now, you sew it together, the blocks, on your sewing machine. And there's a method for doing that. And usually these things come with instructions to show you how to do it. The borders I did not do on the embroidery machine. I added those after the fact, and of course the binding as well. Another example of this kind of thing is this one. This is a wall hanging. This was a sort of a block of a month kind of a thing. It was based on a theme of doors. It was done a few years ago by Dime, Designs and Machine Embroidery, and these blocks were free every month. And what I did was the embroidery machine did the actual doors, not disregard the borders of blue and colors around it. I added those afterwards to make it look like an attic window, and then sewed those all together with my regular sewing machine. But each of the blocks inside, and that's fabric. And essentially, and I've already shown this on the Idiot Quilter this past week, I gave a little quickie demo on what it means or how you do in the hoop applique. So if you haven't seen that, go to this week's Idiot Quilter episode and you'll see it there. And it's basically the method that I show you there is the method that you use here or on anything that is in the hoop applique. This is an in the hoop applique. This is a New York Beauty quilt. I made it this size. I could make it any size that I wanted. It did the quilting in the background. It sewed the pieces together. You just lay down your fabric, and this is great. These are great for getting rid of your scraps too, kind of a thing. And it shows you where to place your fabric. You throw a piece of scrap fabric big enough over that placement line. It tacks it down. You trim it around that line, close to that line. You have special scissors for that. Again, that's in the video, the Quilter this week. and then it finishes off the block for all the raw edges by doing a satin stitch. And you pick the colors you want in your thread and everything like that. This is one of my favorite pieces. I love the way it turned out. Is it fast? Oh no, it is not fast to do these kind of things. These take days and days and days and days. It's one of those projects you might want to come back to. You know, you do so many blocks and then do another project and come back and do a few more blocks. And again, it could have been any size I wanted. This was where I had it though. Could have added things to it. And then there's this sucker. This is the same idea. It's in the hoop, applique and embroidery. It's very elaborate. It's those pieces are you see the sashing are all embroidered and applique as well. A lot of squares for it. Then you sew it all together, each of the blocks together in the sashing, and put on your borders, and away you go. It is a wall hanging. Took a long time, but the end result is really worth it. I enjoy doing in the hoop applique. Have you done much in the hoop applique?
No, I haven't done a lot. I've done a couple of little things, but mostly like the freestanding lace ones that you'll show later.
Which we'll see. But yeah, I really enjoy doing applique this way. Now, someone's going to say, well, can you, you know, you cut out your own shapes and then program the embroidery machine to do the applique stitch to hold it down? No. Unless, and I say no, if you have, like in the case of us, we have Janome machines. So we have the Janome Artistic Digitizer, which is a external computerized embroidery program for designing your own patterns or altering existing ones. It's steep learning curve, very expensive program. I think it cost me about $1,300 Canadian when I bought it at the time. You can actually import into that program a cut shape that you've cut out, and you can train the machine or use the program to create applique stitches that would go around that. But you got to know what you're doing, and I for one don't.
It's takes a while. I've tried doing just a plain old embroidery file, like creating an embroidery file from a cartoon character or whatever, and it takes a long time. Even it'll pick it up and it'll give you a default stitching pattern, but there's a lot of flaws in it, and you have to go in and customize it so that it will stitch out properly.
Now, if you watch, I think her name's Becky, whatever, on Power Tool with Thread, she does a lot of in the hoop applique using her own designs and stuff. Well, she finds other designs, but she's using a Brother machine, and she's using it in conjunction with her scan and cut digital cutting machine for all of that. Personally, she seems to be making way too much work for herself, because she's essentially doing what I do, where you put down a placement stitch, that's your shape, and it outlines the shape. You lay down a piece of fabric over top of it, just a rough cut piece of fabric, and then it does a placement or a tack down stitch to hold the fabric down. Then you trim it all the way around, and then away you go. She's pre-cutting using her scan and cut those shapes, but to me, she's added another step that's not needed.
Yeah, because then you have to be really careful where your placement is.
Yeah,
right?
You got to get it all lined up. I mean, she's really good at it. She's been doing it for a long time. But in my way of thinking, quite frankly, I think it's more work than it's worth.
Yeah, like any of the times I've done that kind of applique, I always done the way Stephen does it, is that I put a piece of fabric down and have the sewing machine do the tack down stitch. Then I cut around the tack down stitch, and
it's really easy to cut
it's
around
easy
those.
to do. Yeah.
And again, if you have not yet seen it, go to this week's Idiot Quilter. I show you exactly what we're talking about.
Well, you do sort of need a good pair of scissors, like what they call applique scissors, to do that, so you can get close to
or
the stitching.
duckbill. They're called
like
duckbill.
You can't really use like a standard set of fabric scissors.
No.
It's too hard to do. So
However, having said that, there is a lady from New Zealand, Creative Kiwi. She does videos all the time showing how to do their embroidery files that they have, and she trims them with a pair of, I haven't got mine, pair of snips,
yeah, okay.
which my
Well,
way of thinking, you could do it, but it's more work than if you use
any
like these ones.
pair of scissors. There you go.
Let me show you. These are what we're talking about, okay? These. They're called duckbill or applique scissors. And you see, they're designed in such a way that you cut like this, but you can get it right up next to the stitching, and you don't usually cut your stitches because you don't want to cut the stitches, right, when you're doing it. Again, if you want to see these in action, how I use them, check the Idiot Quilter video from this week, because I show that in there. Okay, moving on. Okay, there's another one, an example. That's a bookshelf quilt, well, wall hanging. Again, all done in the hoop embroidery, applique. And you can see you get special effects because if you look at these jars, that isn't, this one maybe shows up more because it's a colored one. These are clear. This is Mylar. Mylar is a very thin plastic, usually has shimmer to it. And the idea here was so that, you know, you're looking in a vase here or in a bell jar kind of a thing. And you can quilt over top of Mylar. I don't know if it did on these ones. I think it did the quilting first, then you put that on, and then it did the satin stitch around it to hold it down and everything. But there's all kinds of special effects you can get with these. And the other thing is I could customize these to whatever I wanted them to say. Like up here, I put in Hamlet, you know, Romeo and Juliet is on that one. That kind of thing. So you can customize your designs to a certain extent too, and you do not need a digital embroidery.
Yeah, but when you're doing this, you're all doing each blocks separately in your embroidery machine. Like, it's not like you're just put down one piece of fabric.
No. Those are all blocks.
Yeah.
If you look closely, I think they're 6-inch blocks. You know, there's a block. This is a block, a block, a block. So there's 4 blocks across, 4 blocks down, plus the bookshelf, which is sashing and that kind of thing. Okay, now talking about freestanding applique. Okay, there's applique that is what you think applique, which we've already been showing you. It's flat. This is a bowl, but this is freestanding applique. That each one of those sides of the bowl, the petals from this, you create separately, but they're done on top of fabric. And then it does the quilting or the fancy stitching to each of those pieces. But you'll also notice that there's some little knobby things here. It's hard to see this picture that are hanging out here. Well, those are called eyelets and buttons. And those are actually stitched out as you make each one of these pieces. And that's how you hold it all together. You pull the little button through the little eyelet, and that's what secures it. I usually put a little fabric glue that dries clear on the end of each one of those after it's done, just to make sure it's held together. Can be a little awkward. Hemostats are definitely a necessity for this, for getting a hold of these little buttons and getting them through those eyelets, because those little eyelets are very, very tight.
Yeah, the hemostats help a great deal. There are ways to do it without hemostats, which I've done, but it's the hemostats are a great help.
Yeah, and alligator clips for holding the piece, because in something like this, as you're going around, your angles on that, you get all the buttons into the eyelets on one of those. You go to the next one, as you're putting that in, they're popping out of the other one. So these little alligator clips you can get them anywhere. You just put them on the end of the little button when it goes through the hole, and it keeps it there until you get everything together. Then you can take them all off, put a little glue on it, and away you go. What's the next picture? Okay, these are also a type of, now they're not freestanding lace, they're actually 3-dimensional embroidered objects. And the truck, as you can see, is made up of several pieces. Now, these pieces, you'll notice on the truck, there aren't any of these little knobby things hanging out of it, like on a little spaceship. These you have to sew together using a zigzag stitch. And it's not hard. It sounds hard, but if you do it right, you lay them down flat and then you just fold them up. Now you can do it by hand. I don't. I'm able to, they bend. They'll really bend. And if you've got a free arm sewing machine, that works really well with it. The rocket is one that was held together by the little buttons and eyelets. You can see them there.
Yeah, they're pretty prominent on the side
Yeah.
of the top of the rocket at where those buttons are. So you get a better idea of what that is.
And if you notice the feet of the rocket as well, they look like they're slotted in. Well, they are. The machine will actually do what looks like a buttonhole stitch for some of those parts, and those parts have a little tab on them and they just fit in there and slide down. You have to cut open just like you do on a sewing machine. If you make a buttonhole, you just use your seam ripper and just up there and then it works fine. But again, you can make a whole lot of really interesting things from that. In fact, just before we go on to the next one, we'll show you some other things that we have made. I've made a lot of
I've made some of these as well, so they're kind of fun to make.
So I've got a whole bunch of things for Halloween. This is a freestanding applique pumpkin jack-o'-lantern, and you make very much like that one I showed you with the bowl. You have these little panels here. They're together with the eyelets and the buttons, and this one's designed hole in the bottom. The idea is you put a little light in here, a little battery operated candle light or whatever, an LED light, and it'll shine through depending on how dense your fabric is. It looks really cool for Halloween. And this one should blow your mind. And we have made several of these. We have a little haunted village, actually. Both Walter and I have made ones like this. This is all haunted.
And they're fun to make too.
Yeah.
Except they're very time consuming.
Very time consuming. There's a lot of pieces here. And you see, these are held together as well. Some of it, this is kind of a mixture of both zigzag stitching on your sewing machine for certain panels and button and eyelet holes as well. And it's got 2 holes in the bottom. You can light it up as well. And again, it looks really good, but time consuming to make. And we've got about, I don't know, 3 or 4 different types of styles.
Like you did a bunch of, I did a few of the houses, and you did like this one and a couple other ones.
I did some other ones too.
And yeah, so the 2 of us were working on them together.
Yeah.
But you know, they were time consuming. They took a while to put together.
But the end result's worth it. But I don't recommend that for your first effort at one of these.
No, you'll get
you
frustrated.
go for this. Go for something smaller.
No, I would say if you're a beginner, stick with you know, like simple embroidery projects at first, just to get the hang of how your machine it works, and then as time goes on, you can go into more elaborate things.
Well, they all work the same way. Okay, it's just that means the more complex means usually more pieces. That's all. Once you learn the technique, then you're fine. You can do anything with them. All right, so next thing up here is, all right, this is the same idea as the ones I had on the wall, except this is a table runner. It is a stylized New York beauty kind of thing. It's in the hoop applique again, and it's done the quilting, the whole bit, makes it all into pieces. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces that are on the ends that give it the rounded shape, and then you have, I think, 8 more squares for the rest of it. And you just sew it all together. Again, the instructions that come with these, and they all come with instructions, don't neglect them, and to put it together. I like making these kind of things in the hoop. And here's an well, this isn't another example. Just saying, I'll come back to that one. This one. Now that one took a long time to do, but it's the same method as the other table runner. The only difference here is there's more pieces and a lot more embroidery, as well as just in the hoop fabric kind of thing. But you know, you make stunning projects with this. So if I back up here, I also want to show you this. This was sort of my own design. You know, you sometimes need to think out of the box. I found a pattern for making 1 maple leaf. And the maple leaf is really simple. It's an in the hoop applique. You just lay down your fabric. It tells you where to put it. It tacks it down. You trim it. It does a satin stitch. And you notice the satin stitch on this is actually a very decorative stitch. And sometimes they'll have ones like that. And it did the veining as well. And I just made a whole bunch of them in different sizes because on your embroidery machine, you'll probably have some limited editing ability. And one of those things that's there will be changing the size to a certain degree. On our machines that allow you to make the pattern 20% bigger or 20% smaller. So you go from 100 to 120% or from 100 to 80%. So I just made a bunch of these and then I used fabric glue and I tacked them down. I made 2 of these and they sit on our coffee table upstairs. We have a round coffee table and they're just a little accent piece. And then, of course, this is another one of those freestanding 3D projects. But if you notice in the top of the lighthouse, it's been designed so you can put a little electric tea light in the top of it, like the light for the lighthouse. But that is organza. And so you can actually embroider on organza. If you need something that's very sheer, you can do that on your embroidery machine. So, you know, it's also, you're not limited to just using quilting cotton or t-shirt material or something like that. You can use other materials as well. Yeah, you have to know about stabilizers, but for holding things down. For example, for anything that's a freestanding lace where you don't want to see fabric in it because you don't have any fabric in it or you don't want to see the stabilizer, there's something called water soluble stabilizer that you use. And then when you finish the piece, you just dunk it in water and it all rinses out. And so you're left with just fishing.
For even a thing like this lighthouse, the bottom part where you have applique in there, we still use the water soluble in it too, right?
Yes.
So but we don't wash it all out, so it stays still.
Yeah, we leave a little bit of it in. It's like a glue. It's basically like a glue, and then it'll make the pieces stiffer so they'll stand up better and easier to put together. That's another trick you'll learn as you get more experienced in all of this. And I showed that one. So that's just scratching the surface of what you can make. Now, Walter's done things with tote bags. I have made, and I don't have a sample of it, a complete tote bag in the hoop.
In the hoop. Mine aren't in the hoop. All I've done is these are just standard embroidery files, but they're big embroidery files. And I measured out my fabric for making a bag, and I figure out where I want the embroidery to show up on the bag, right? Taking into account that I have to put a bottom in the bag and everything else, and I take a panel of fabric and embroider on it using usually I use tearaway stabilizer in the back. I have thinking of trying to use battleizer or something in the future, so I don't have to necessarily trim it off. But so I've made several of these bags for like Christmas bags, but it's just standard embroidery in the front. But they're large, like, I mean, a lot of people buy embroidery. Okay,
show the damn bag.
So I've got this Christmas bag, and it has a very elaborate embroidery pattern. It's got thousands, like 72,000 stitches on it, type of thing. It takes quite a while for it to stitch out. I've got another one on the back, right? And then I've done an autumn themed one where it's got autumn stuff on it. And
I can hear the Walter fan club now
going. And actually it looks very impressive when you see a bag like that. With this embroidery on it. And but it's just simple right out embroidery. It's just that they're big patterns and they take quite a long time to stitch out, several hours on it. And once you've stitched out one of those, the next time you want to stitch out one, you should change your needle in your machine because these have thousands and thousands of stitches in here. And
your needle will go
needle get dull really quickly.
And you'll see getting a lot of thread breaks and things like that. So you should always, when you're doing a new major project, change your needle. Okay. because that's very important, especially in machine embroidery, because that needle is not just going through the fabric, it may be going through, like Walter said, battleizer or batting
Yeah, and
too,
then
and it's going through other stitches as well.
like if you take, for instance, this pattern here, there's layers and layers of stitches that go over top of each other on there. So you're not just going through your fabric and your stabilizer, you're going through other stitches it's layered on top of.
Yeah, that's how actually when you first get an elaborate file like that, and you'll notice, well, they may have several different shades of the same color. Well, the reason for that is to create a shading or shadowing effect to give more depth to the embroidery design. And that's why it's going over other stitches as well.
Yeah, like for instance, in this pattern on the Christmas tree, there are several shades of green in this Christmas tree. It started off with a light green, doing a light green Christmas tree. Then it started stitching dark colors over top of it to give you the shading.
It's not unlike what a painter does to add depth to a painting using, various shades of a color and in layers to create that an effect that makes it pop out from the canvas more. It's the same kind of thing. So those are some of the different things, and I'm always I love doing machine embroidery. I'm
Now,
constantly doing it.
you will notice though that you'll need a lot of different thread colors to be able to do this. So you will have to invest in lots of different thread colors.
Like I have probably what, 500 to 600 spools of Floriani embroidery thread.
Now you don't really need that much
to get
initially,
started.
but you may have to pick up some extra threads for a project. If you only start out with about 50 threads, probably a good base amount of threads, you're going to have to, you may end up getting another project and you may have to start adding colors to that.
And it depends on, you don't necessarily have to be married to the colors that a particular file comes in. Walter never is. Sometimes you just don't like the colors that they're using for thread.
Yeah, like
You're
I don't
free to
have
change that.
I don't have an example here, but I've had to change the threads because I use a non-standard thread, so I have to sort of guess which colors to use on my embroidery compared to what what the color is called for on the pattern. But I had another one that I did. There was a butterfly and it had a lot of browns in it and stuff like that. I changed the browns to fuchsia and stuff like that because I didn't like the colors that it came in.
So it's really up to you. You're the person that's doing it. You do what you want to do. You do you. So some tips then. A lot of these things when you're first getting started will be overwhelming, but they should have instructions as a PDF file. It'll either be right along with when you download the file. We'll talk about that in a minute, where you find these things, or it may direct you to another link within the site and you download that, print it out, or read it from your computer. I prefer to read it on paper and read it. Definitely read it, okay? Especially when you're first starting out. Now, I've done these kind of things so many times, and after you've done a few of them, it's pretty much the same way to do it. But so I just sort of skim through them. But first time you're doing this, definitely read the instructions. They put them together. Some companies put instructions together that are better than others. Designs by Juju and Sweet Pea usually have pictures of every step along the way, which I find very helpful. Others may not have that, so it depends. Now, we talked about stabilizers. We are not going to get into the different kinds of stabilizers, but do you need stabilizer? Yes, you need stabilizer for any project you're using on your embroidery machine, because you have to have something that supports the thread. Even in freestanding lace, which doesn't have any fabric or anything like that, you still have to start out with stabilizer.
And more than one layer sometimes.
Yes. And the reason being is, okay, and this is a fault with some of these companies that design files. In their instructions say 1 sheet of tearaway stabilizer. Maybe. For me, my rule is I use a minimum of 2 layers of any stabilizer that I'm using in a project, regardless of what the instructions say. Reason is the more stitches, the more that your fabric's going to be pulled and it's going to pucker. And the stabilizer, if you've got enough of it in there, will stop that from happening. So you may have to, on something like the one that Walter
Yeah,
has in
like
that
this
bag.
one, I know that I used 4 layers of 2.5 ounce stabilizer, tearaway stabilizer on this. As soon as I see that it starts to pucker, I add another layer of stabilizer.
Yep. And people, like, stabilizer is expensive, and people are loath to use more than 1 or 2 layers of it. But if you think about it, you want something that's going to be worth your time and effort, and there's a lot of time and effort, so spend the money. It's not that bad.
And I will sometimes reuse my stabilizer by the stuff that I tear away. If I have a big enough piece,
Yeah.
I'll layer pieces underneath it so that I don't go through as much stabilizer.
Now we buy stabilizer by the roll, big rolls of it from a place called monfil.ca, and you've heard us talk about Monfil before. They've got the best prices of anybody for stabilizer that I've ever found. And their stabilizer is very, very good. And they have all of the ones that you possibly would ever need for different applications. So I used to save every little scrap of stabilizer when I first did this. Now, nah, if it's not a huge hunk, I just toss it, because I found, like, I never could find a piece big enough. It's like batting scraps, right? You save your batting scraps and you have quite a collection of it, but you never seem to have enough of it for whatever you want to do.
Yeah, and it can cause a piece stabilizer can cause it can cause a problem with stitching sometimes. But
Yeah.
I haven't really run into a lot of problems. What I always try and do is sandwich my piece stabilizer between 2 full sheets of stabilizer so that nothing can catch when it's going through.
These are things you learn as time goes by. Now, thread and needle, very important, okay? But make sure, I was dealing with someone the other day, and she was having a little problem with her thread shredding. Well, like on a sewing machine, if your thread is shredding, you probably have the wrong needle and thread matched up. You probably have either the hole in your needle is too small. Hiccup suddenly. The hole in your needle is too small for the weight of the thread, and that'll cause it to shred. Or the hole's too big, and so your thread is bouncing all around, and that'll cause thread breaks.
Or your needle's old.
Or your needle is old, yeah. But the important thing here about this point is know what needle to use with what thread. Now, I use Floriani embroidery thread, and it is a 40 weight. So I use a 90/14 embroidery needle in my machine. Okay, and I emphasized embroidery needle. You can buy, yes, you can buy universal needles. I stay away from universal needles because one needle does not do everything that you want. I buy needles that actually say embroidery. Now, Schmitz has them, Floriani makes them, all of them. Look for ones that say embroidery needle, and that's what you use. You can get needles that are called quilting needles too, that you use in your domestic machine when you're doing your patchwork. I use those for that, but I don't use those in the embroidery machine. I use embroidery needles. Now, why? Because embroidery needles are really sharp. Really sharp. Remember what we said about how many layers of thread and fabric and batting you could be going through? You want a really sharp needle. You do not want to use a ballpoint. Ballpoint is meant for knits, right? Because it doesn't really pierce. It pushes aside the fibers of the fabric. Well, you're going through probably quilting cotton for the most part on this. There's no pushing fibers aside. You got to go through them. And you want to punch in a nice clean little hole for that. So make sure you've got the right needle, the right size needle for the right size thread. And your bobbin thread should be probably a 60. You want a little finer thread in your bobbin. Now, some people try to wind their own bobbins, and you can. I don't. I tried to wind my own bobbins with Floriani because I wanted the back of something to match the front of the something, which I never bother with anymore because I find nine times out of 10 that doesn't matter. So I just use white pre-wound bobbins, but I use 60 weight. If you try to use Floriani, my example, wind your own bobbin, my machine does not like Floriani in the bobbin. Doesn't mind it as a top thread, does not want it in the bobbin. All kinds of problems.
Yeah, you can run into a lot of problems when you try and use the 40 weight thread in your bobbin for embroidery.
Yeah, and tension is extremely important in embroidery. I mean, tension is important in all sewing, but it's especially important in embroidery as well. So you want to
with most projects, you don't need a bottom thread to match your top thread.
So using a slightly higher number bobbin thread, which means a thinner bobbin thread, like a 60 weight, if you're using a 40 weight top thread, works very, very well.
Like my bag, that whole embroidery thing is using a white bobbin thread, 60 weight white bobbin thread. So you can tell the color is still all red and everything else.
Well, because the tension's right.
The tension is right. It should not be pulling your bobbin thread to the front.
But even more importantly is you cannot see the back of the embroidery because it's the lined bag. The lining hides that. So on a lot of projects, you will have some sort of a lining or a batting, so you don't need to worry. And you'll find it in the instructions. They'll say, okay, wind this many bobbins to match this thread, this thread, this thread, this thread. If no one's going to see the back, don't waste your time winding bobbins. Also, when you wind bobbins, you're not going to get the same consistency in the winding as you will on a pre-wound bobbin that are, have an industrial standard for it in the machines that they create them on. So, and buying
I mean, if you're really a stickler and for some reason you you're doing a project that's going to be seen on both sides, I would recommend getting a regular sewing thread that matches the color of your top embroidery thread and use that in your bobbin if you really want that.
Yeah.
But don't try and use your embroidery thread as your bottom thread.
Now, we talked earlier about, it's up to you what colors you want to use. I mean, the file is going to tell you what it wants you to use. But a lot of these manufacturers of these files have a certain brand of thread. Like, for example, Embroidery Online, they like Isocore. Other ones like Floriani or Madeira or things like that. Well, it really doesn't matter. You can pick the colors and you can find programs, and some of these sites where you'll buy the file from will actually have a section where they'll do a conversion for you for most of the major types of embroidery threads. So they might be recommending Isocore, but they'll have an equivalent chart for a color that is really close and say in Floriani or something like that. I have an app on my phone actually that does this for me. It came from Floriani.
And even that, sometimes you might look at the color that the app has given you and stuff like that, and you think, I still don't like that color. I'm going to substitute a different color.
And you're free to do so. However, be aware of shading, which we talked about before, because if it's calling for 3 different colors of green, and you decide you only have one green in your set, so you'll just do all of those ones in that green, you can, but it's going to look flat, because it's designed to give it dimension, and that's with the different shades of the green. So this is what we're saying. Over time, you'll be adding to your collection of threads. You will have 3, 4, 5, 15 different colors of blue or whatever, because they're shades. So yeah, but that'll come with time. You'll get used to that. You'll figure that out on your own. Now, use the right hoop. Your embroidery machine probably came with several hoops. Our Janome 550s come with what, 5 hoops? 4 hoops, 5 hoops?
At least 4.
I think,
the small square one at 14, 2 types of 20, a square 20 and a rectangular 20, and the 36B hoop.
So that's 4, and then we
optionally bought another hoop called the R28B, which is sort of between
the very large hoop,
and
one that's more of a medium hoop.
Yeah, your 550E will work with that as well, but it's an optional hoop.
But what we're saying is when your file comes up on the screen of your embroidery machine, it's going to tell you what hoop to use, depending on your brand of machine, because the hoops are determined by the machine. You just can't use any hoop interchangeably with other machines.
But in the case of our 550E, since the R28 is an optional hoop, it may come up on your machine to load an R28 hoop in. What you can do is load the larger hoop in.
Yeah, it's not the smaller, usually, unless you've altered the size of the file.
Yeah.
And this is where a lot of people get
screwed
up. And it can be a major screw up. If you're not using the right hoop, you have the chance of your needle puncturing your hoop. And if that happens, that'll only happen to you once, because you'll know. Because the needle will come down, it will make a horrible noise. Your machine will do backflips on your desk, on your table, and the whole bit, and you will think you've wrecked your machine. And you can. Or wrecked your hoop. And hoops are not cheap. To buy additional hoops, they're not like $20. They're like a couple of hundred or more for them. So you want to pay attention to that. If you screw around with the size of the file and you make it smaller or bigger, well, there is a facility on your embroidery machine where it will do a trace. It'll go around and show you the outside parameter of the design without doing any sewing, and you can tell from that whether your hoop is going to be big enough or too small. But the general rule of thumb is if you alter the file and you make it bigger, go to the next size up in a hoop size.
Yeah, and sometimes it's confusing with the Janome machine because you get two R20 hoops. One's a square one and one's a rectangular one. And you need to know which one you're using.
Well, they will designate them. They'll put R20SQ or 20SQ or 20REC or just RE, rectangle, square.
Right. And the other thing that can happen is if you accidentally grab the hoop or the hoop hits the wall or something like that while it's trying to embroider, it may screw up your...
It'll put it out of alignment.
It will put your machine out of alignment, and that can cause a problem. Your embroidery can shift in the hoop, and it may end up hitting the edge of the hoop or something. So don't touch your hoop.
Or it's just going to scramble your design, and you can't recover from that. You have to start all over again. So if that happened in the last 5 minutes of a 5-hour design, you might say some nasty words with that. Ask us how we know. So make sure your embroidery machine has clearance all the way around it. Don't be trying to force it into a corner. It has to, like the table is one size, but the hoops will overshoot the size of the table, and they're moving this way, that way, this way. So you got to have the space for it. So
now in our case of our 550E, I did have the hoop hit the back wall one time and it threw it all off. Yeah. And I ended up turning off the machine and returning it back on again, and it fixed the location. But in the meantime, some of the embroidery was off center and I had to start all over again.
Yep. And it'll be very obvious. It's not a question of, it's not like Walter looking at one of my quilts and finding this little minor oops. On an embroidery design, that oops will be noticeable in most cases.
And also make sure that when you got your stabilizer and your fabric in the hoop, make sure the hoop is, the fabric and the stabilizer is secure in your hoop, because if it's not, it can shift, the fabric can shift in your hoop, and that can cause a problem too.
And it can pop as well. Now, another thing too about talking about stabilizers and making sure your fabric is well anchored in there. Make sure your fabric is flat. Press it. If it's got folds in it, press it, because those folds will show up. It's like when you're quilting a quilt, if you've got a fold in the back of the quilt or something like that. Same thing can happen on the embroidery machine, and that's an ugly look. And what else I want to say about that? Okay. I have heard recently some people have said, to make their fabric really stiff when they put it, and it doesn't have to be stiff. It just has to be taut. And your hoop, that's what the hoop is for. But some people like to really over spray
Tighten it.
starch.
Oh yeah.
No, spray starch the fabric first. You don't really need to. And I've heard of some people using some of those fabric stiffener products, like, is it Terracell or something, which is a spray that basically, when it dries, your fabric feels kind of like a soft paper. Um,
I wouldn't recommend that.
don't use those.
I think it might cause you some problems with the needle and stuff like that.
They're gummy.
And I don't think that would be a good idea. It does need to be secure in your hoop, but it shouldn't be pulled too tight either.
Because it can pop.
Well, what we talk about pop is your two hoops come apart, and then everything's out of
And
whack.
then you're never going to get that back in. Plus, it'll probably tangle up in your needle as it's going along.
Yeah.
The other thing that can happen too is if your fabric is too taut and there is a bird's nest forms, and that can happen for a variety of reasons. We're not going to go into those reasons on this one today. We've talked about those before.
Yeah, if a bird, yeah, go ahead.
If a bird nest happens, it'll catch your thread into the bobbin down below, and it'll pull your fabric into the bobbin case as well. And that can, like, your whole hoop will go bingo out of it. And again, you can't recover from that. You have to start all over. Okay, a little bit more rare, but it's a possibility.
It has happened to me.
So you just want your fabric to be nice and flat, no gaps, sort of taut, but not so taut that you can jump up and down on it like a trampoline. And you'll get to know the feel of when you put it in. Anybody who's done hand embroidery, you know about that. And when you put it in a hoop for doing hand embroidery, it's very much the same in a machine embroidery system as well. But back to these solutions that stiffen your fabric, they can gum up your needle
Which may cause a bird's nest or something like that.
And you don't need that stuff for it. If your fabric, as we said, is in your hoop properly, and you're
nice
using
and
the
pressed,
right, and you're using decent stabilizer amounts and whatnot, you don't need to spray anything into this for any kind of fabric. Now, there'll be somebody on here who's going to write me a message to say they found theirs just worked the best because they use this spray in the whole bit. Well, if it's working for you, go for it. I don't recommend it.
I don't do it. It doesn't. I've never really had too many problems by not doing it. None actually.
No.
There is what the other thing is that we're talking about using 2 or 3 layers of stabilizer. Yeah. I only usually put 1 layer of stabilizer in my hoop, and what I'll do is I'll float or shove other pieces of stabilizer underneath it.
You can do that because your hoop may not be able to handle. If you're doing something that's got a piece of batting in it and it's a taut fabric, that's probably all your hoop can handle, depending on how thick the batting is, for example. So you can do what they call float it. You just put the sheet just under the hoop. And what happens is when the hoop, when it's stitching, it'll pick up the stabilizer and it won't move because it gets stitched right into the back of the design. It doesn't have to necessarily be hooped. But then sometimes you do want to hoop your stabilizer, because if you just have a taut fabric and nothing else, then yeah, at least 1 or 2 layers in that. And then if you add more layers, if you need more layers, float the other layers underneath it. Okay. Speaking about designs. All right. You can do a search. You decide you want you want a clown. You want to stitch out a clown. And you're not sure where to go to get a clown. And you want to see what's available. So you go in and you do a Google search and you put in cloud embroidery file. And you'll get stuff. It'll come up. Well, look at who is providing that file. If it's a major company like Embroidery Online, Urban Threads, Designs by Juju, Sweet Pea, Creative Kiwi, okay, and there's a few others out there as well, then you're probably pretty sure that you're not going to have a problem with that design because they have been tested and have been designed properly. But if you buy one off of Etsy because Mary Lou has decided that she's got a digitizing software and loves to make her own designs in the whole bit and puts them through that, and then she sells them on her Etsy shop, they may work, they may not work properly. or they may not be designed in the most efficient way, or maybe some of the stitching that's in it is a little loose. All of those things can cause you problems stitching something out. Okay? You can go back and bitch to Mary Lou about this, but Mary Lou's going to tell you, I've never had a problem with it. It must be you.
Yeah, and the other thing is too is some people may go into Etsy or Pinterest or something like that, or I don't know if Pinterest sells. It must be Etsy.
No, it's a
Etsy, and sells you embroidery files. You can get like a dozen embroidery files for $2.99.
Yeah.
Whereas you have to go embroidery online and get similar files, and it may cost you a little bit more. It may not be a bargain to get those files, because the files may not be may not stitch out properly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not saying that those files won't stitch out properly,
but you're taking
you're taking a chance. And if you're somebody that's new to embroidery, I would think that it would be best for you to stick with the brand names first, because at least you know that you're going to get a fairly you know that you're getting a good product, and you don't want all kinds of other problems to occur while you're a brand new embroiderer.
Yeah, because
then it'll make you really frustrated, and
you won't understand and take it back.
Now, if you've embroidered for 1,000 years and you see Mary Lou's designs on there and you think, oh, I love those designs, I'll get a couple, I'll take a chance and get one, and then you put it in your machine, and if it starts screwing up your machine, because you're an experienced embroiderer, you already know, oh, that might be the embroidery file.
Yeah. So, when you're first starting out, you want to have the least amount of problems, because you also have to accept this. You will have problems. Okay. When you first use it, it is not completely foolproof for a variety of reasons. So this is why you need to do one other thing besides read your manual. Take a class. If the place where you bought your embroidery machine, and many of them do, offer a class, some offer a free class, some it might be a paid class, it may be a series of classes, take the class. You've invested thousands of dollars in this machine. Invest a few bucks more in yourself to learn how to use your machine and use it properly. It is well worth the effort to do that. And also, it's easier to learn if you're around other people and people who know what they're doing than trying to learn it on your own, or even by going to YouTube. Because I have found that many YouTube videos showing how to do an embroidery file or that leave out a step. They make assumptions. Like for what we just said about stabilizer. Creative Kiwi, she pins her stabilizer with T-pins all the way around.
I
don't know why she does. Because if you've hooped it properly, it'll hold in. You don't need to do that. But I guess for her, maybe that's the method she learned when she first got into it. I mean, her videos are excellent, really excellent. And they have one for almost any design that you buy from Creative Kiwi. So, which I find very, very helpful on things. But I don't see the point of doing all this pinning. You shouldn't have to use pins in fact, you shouldn't use pins.
No, because I'd be afraid to hit them.
Yeah. Or if the pin comes loose and flies up, because there's a lot of movement in a hoop, or drops down into your machine. Yeah. But anyways, that's just her method and it works for her. So whatever. And the other thing you need to do is, machine embroidery is not a quickie on anything you do, no matter how elaborate it is. Give yourself time. If you suddenly have this idea, oh, I'm going over to such and such's house for dinner tonight, I should take a hostess gift. I've got some blank tea towels upstairs. I can just put a monogram on a couple of those. And that won't take long. I can do that in 15 minutes. Maybe yes. Maybe no.
Yeah, and sometimes a pattern will come up like the ones I've done, and it'll say it'll take 55 minutes to stitch out, right? Well, in actual fact, it probably takes more like
double that,
maybe even triple that, depending on how fast you are at changing threads. And pausing to figure out what thread you're going to
And
use
how
next.
well organized and planned ahead you are. Like you
Yeah.
have all your fabrics, if you're doing it in the hoop applique, all laid out. You know exactly what you're going to use and the order you're going to use it in. You've got all your threads picked and laid out, and you know all that kind of stuff. So yeah, this is not a rush job here. This is something that is going to take time, but it's fun. And the first time you get an embroidery machine, you'll be sitting there for hours watching it. Look what it's doing now. Ooh, this is cool. That kind of thing. So, yeah, so those are some things. There's a little bit of overlap in this video to some other videos we've done in the past as well, but we want to show you a little bit more. And this was generated from the fact that actually it was somebody on Sewing with Stephanie and Steven this week who said to me, have you ever done a video where you've shown all the different things that you can make in an embroidery machine that you've done? And I said, well, yes and no. I've shown things I've made. I've just never put it in one package like this. So now you have it one package. So have fun, enjoy the process. If you've got one in a box and your husband bought it for you for Christmas 3 Christmases ago and you've been intimidated, you're never going to get over that if you don't take it out of the box and use it. Okay, so get
And
it out of the
take a
box.
class.
And take a class or two. Yeah, definitely take that. Okay. Well, I think that's it for us today. Thanks everybody for joining us. I hope you got something out of the video. And also, if you have not seen the Idiot Quilter this week, do watch that for that video that I show how I will do an in the hoop, a very simple in the hoop applique, and show you exactly all the things we've been talking about, but in practice. Okay, that's it for us today. Thanks for joining us. Hope you have a good week, what's left of it, or weekend, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Bye for now.